Okay, continue. My name is Bill Fairfield, and basically I'm a registered education provider with the Scrum Alliance, and that means I used to travel around the country teaching certified Scrum developer classes, and now I teach them right here from home. And what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that you should know if you are a Scrum developer. So at an organizational level, there's lots of people who have been trained in Agile in general and Scrum in particular. And when you have this training, you learn a bunch of things. And one of the things that you learn is Agile is going to be disruptive. It is not a process improvement. It is a way of thinking. And you see this at the top of an organization. The focus of an organization needs to change from working on projects, which have defined timeframes and defined scopes, to products, which have neither. And all the way down to developers. The way we structure teams is completely different in an Agile universe. They're not siloed anymore. They're cross-functional teams. They're not ad hoc or tiger teams. We want them to last for a very, very long time. The way work is managed is completely different. In a waterfall universe, management tries to eliminate idle workers. So if your boss gives you work, and your boss thinks it's only going to keep you 50% busy, they give you more work and more work and more work. In an Agile universe, what we want to focus on is idle work. Idle work is defined as work that's been started, but nobody's working on now, either because you're forced to multitask or it's blocked. But our goal is to eliminate idle work. And so you'll hear the mantra a lot, stop starting things, start finishing things. Planning is completely different in an Agile universe. We do not make one big overall plan and attempt to follow it. Planning is on a just-in-time basis. In a waterfall universe, we have a process, a value stream, and the goal is to optimize each step in that process. In an Agile universe, the goal is to optimize the process, not any particular step within the process. One of the biggest changes is in what we measure. When I coach at an Agile organization, before I'll take a coaching job, management has to agree that they are going to stop asking, are we on budget and are we on schedule? Because those are completely meaningless questions in an Agile universe. Instead, we focus not on outputs, we focus on outcome. Are we delivering value? How do we know we're delivering value? How are we going to measure that we're delivering value? But what we're going to focus on today is the technical aspect of this. And this is where most organizations are completely lagging, figuring the developers will just figure it out. When we work on this, the hardest thing to change is the way you think. Right? Everything else will follow if I can change the way you think. If I can't, everything's going to be a struggle, everything's going to be difficult, and you'll understand things in bits and pieces as opposed to understanding one coherent whole. I do a fair amount of training. I also do a fair amount of coaching. And whenever I coach, I go into an organization, and what I find is no one has trained the developers. Or if they train the developers, they put them through a Scrum Master class. And the developers come out with a very good understanding of Scrum and what a Scrum Master does. Yippee. So what I see is this. From a developer who hasn't been trained point of view, what they see is this 2-week time box. And they try to continue to work the way they've always worked. They do a mini waterfall within each sprint, and they fail. They fail for lots of reasons, but one of the biggest ones is that the timing is so compressed that when they find a bug in test, there's no time to fix it. Mm-hmm. And so what you will hear as a Scrum Master is two things. The first thing you're going to hear is the sprint's too short. We need to lengthen the sprint. All right, so that's plan number one. We'll lengthen the sprint. But then you start running up against the Scrum guide, and it says you can't lengthen it more than 4 weeks. And we can't do this waterfall in 4 weeks. So the developers will then propose something else. Any guesses as to what that something else is going to be? Jared, you look like you knew the answer. Go ahead and unmute and say
one thing I've heard is, well, let's lengthen our sprint.
Right. So that's the first approach. We're going to lengthen the sprint as long as we possibly can. And what comes when that fails? And by the way, this is a perfect example of silos.
Requirement sprint.
Okay. Requirement sprint. What you'll also see is the other end of this. Well, we'll develop the software in this sprint, and then we'll give it to the testers. So while we're developing in this sprint, they'll test what we did last sprint. Right? Hard to think of a rule this doesn't violate, right? We're now not producing valuable product every product increment. We didn't, in our sprint planning, plan for fixing all the bugs that the testers found. And so we continuously fail over and over and over again when we use either of these approaches. In order to make Scrum work at the developer level, we need to use a lot of Agile engineering practices. Almost all of these came out of extreme programming, which is one of the reasons I recommended the book I did. And basically every version of Agile that I'm familiar with, whether you're talking adaptive systems development or dynamic systems development, every one of them has adopted most of these principles of software development if they want to be successful. But the problem comes in the training. So we're going to do something a little different here for a moment. And let's see if I can't real quickly bring this up. So what I want you to do is navigate to kahoot.it. And when you do that, it will ask you for a PIN number. And that PIN is 5570038. And we're going to play a little bit of a numbers game here. And Bob, you were first. Congratulations. Jenny's friend. Warrior woman. See, you guys have got this down right from the start. So many people think, oh, I have to enter my real name here. Classy Possum 64. See, I wish we were in person because I'd love to hear the story behind that. Okay, anybody else want to enter, or should we start? Remove testing from the process. Oh, I like that. Okay, it's only 2 questions here, and so we're going to start. Okay, and so 3 of you got this correct. There are more than 1 million certified Scrum Masters and Scrum product owners. Right, so that's a tremendous accomplishment, and this is only Scrum Alliance certifications. This isn't counting Scrum.org and all the other organizations that issue it. So here's question number 2. And 13 of you got that right. There are fewer than 10,000 certified Scrum developers. Right? So if you figure a team of 6 has 1 Scrum Master, and there's 1 million Scrum Masters out there, we're short a few certified Scrum developers. And this is why Scrum is viewed as so stressful among developers, is no one has taught them how to go about developing software in an Agile environment. And so they try to do the waterfall and try to get something cranked out in 2 weeks, and they fail miserably. Probably the most important process or approach in software development for Agile is test-driven development. Test-driven development is conceptually very, very simple. But it's one of those things that is very difficult to adopt. This reminds me so much of John Lister. John Lister lived, I don't know, roughly 150 years ago. He's the guy Listerine is named after. And he came up with this wonderful idea. Anybody have a guess as to what that idea is? And you can shout it out or type it in the chat.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands before what?
Surgery.
Surgery. That's exactly right. Surgeons should wash their hands before they operate on a patient. And the reaction to that was violent by surgeons. I don't have time. People are dying in the next room, and you want me to go wash my hands? Are you insane? Right? This is going to kill people. I don't have time. This is the exact argument I hear in test-driven development. Right? If you do TDD properly, you will have roughly 7 times the volume in terms of lines of code of unit-level tests that you do production code. And the immediate response is, I don't have time to write all that. Nobody does. Right? You're wrong. You don't have time to not write it. Right? It's just that you're going to spend all your time in the integration phase if you don't do this. It's extraordinarily difficult to integrate software and make it work when you don't know that the components are known working. It's like working on your car and the car's running rough. What's the cause? Well, one of the last things you check is that the camshaft wasn't built according to print. Right? You'd spend a lot of money replacing parts before you finally figured out that that's what the concept was. Washing your hands, there are some things that are completely arbitrary. The finger is divided into 5 sections. Each section is brushed 10 times. Nobody's ever done a study that says 11 is better than 10 or 9 is faster and more efficient. Yeah. And Jared has hit something that's actually absolutely correct. We do not spend most of our time writing code. Spend most of my time debugging it and trying to figure out why it's not working and where the heck the stupid bug is. Test-driven development has 2 rules and only 2 rules in it, and that's it. One of them is that the only reason you're ever allowed to write new code is because you have a failing test. So if you have a new requirement, you are not allowed to sit down and write code to implement that new requirement. Instead, you must sit down and write tests. And what's going to happen when I run those tests? Assuming I've written the test properly. and Bob's nailed it. They're going to fail. At least they should fail, because I haven't written any code to make them pass yet. And that drives us then to rule 2. Rule 2 is that I write the minimum code necessary to make the test pass. I can improve the quality of the code later. That's a concept called refactoring, which we're going to talk about shortly. And so what you see happening is we bring the testers' deliberate discovery skills into the process much, much earlier than we otherwise would have. Several things happen when I do this. One of them is if I'm just writing code, it is very, very easy to write untestable code. In fact, for those of you that are developers, every time you've used the word new, you've written untestable code. Right? You have hardwired yourself to something that you don't have control over. It's impossible to write untestable code if you're doing test-driven development. The second thing this does is it sets a finish line. I'm done. Shift left. Testing is visualized well here. Cool. It sets a finish line. I'm done when all the tests pass. Now, I may not like the quality of the code. I may go through a refactoring process, but my goal is to get all the tests pass. And so this process, you'll often hear it referred to as red, green, clean, or red, green refactor. And this has the way to do with the way IDEs work. So you write a test, you run the test. If a test fails, most IDEs give you a red bar. Then I write the code to make the test pass. The IDE gives me a green bar. Then, and this is the crucial part, every definition of done should have quality metrics in it. You don't want to deploy garbage. You're not done until the code meets those quality metrics. So in my shop, we use 2. One of them is technical debt, and the other is cyclometric complexity. And there are tools that measure both of these. You're not done. You refactor the code until you hit our quality requirements. And then you're done and move on to the next concept. So this is the first practice that every developer should understand and should practice, is test-driven development. It is an extremely difficult adjustment to people who have never used it. Most organizations today have decided that unit testing is a good thing, and then they work very hard at making it worthless. And the way they do that is mandate code coverage, and the developers all write the code after the fact. And what happens is this. First of all, how do I know I'm done if I'm going to write my tests later? And the answer, of course, is I don't really. But the second thing that happens is that when I write my tests after the fact, and picking a number not quite at random, let's suppose the standard is 70%. What happens if I hit a chunk of code that is untestable? What am I going to do? Move on. Bob, you have a development background, don't you? That's right. I'll get my 70% someplace else, right? Because I don't have time to rewrite that chunk of code that's untestable. And the sad truth is, if I did that, so did every other member of my development team. And what this means is that my test suite has a whole bunch of holes in it. So from a management perspective, failing a test means we have a problem. Passing the test suite doesn't give me any confidence in anything because I know the test suite is filled with holes. On the other hand, writing them first avoids this problem. The second practice that we need developers to follow is to participate in the refining. Not one or two, everybody. And there's 3 aspects to this. First of all is figure out what we need, why we need it, and then some type of sizing estimate. I'm going to talk about the last one first because that's what is the most controversial. A lot of developers don't like to estimate. I happen to be a fan of estimating if you do it for the right reasons. And the biggest reason is to make sure you and I understand something the same way. So regardless of units, if I estimated at a 3 and you estimated at a 20, we don't understand it the same way. Either you see a difficulty I don't, or I see a simplification that you don't, but we don't understand it the same way. And the goal of refining is to develop this shared understanding. In an Agile universe, this happens through conversations between the people doing the developing, the people doing the testing, and the people who are doing the specifying, typically in the form of a product owner. One of the pushbacks I get from a lot of organizations is we have to write it down. It isn't clear until you write it down. I don't believe that. And let me give you a couple of examples of why I don't believe this. And you can figure out that this happened simply because somebody wrote down what the customer wanted and then handed it to the person who was actually doing the work. And so we have things like this. Or this. This is following written directions, right, as opposed to understanding what the customer wants. You can also see that in something like this, where it's not clear. Well, thanks, Chris. I used to travel a lot. And every hotel I stay in has a fitness room, and the fitness rooms all have treadmills in it, and the treadmills all have this sign hanging above them. And as a developer, I was very frequently given things like this. What I want you to do is in the chat, type out the answer to the question I'm going to ask you, but don't submit it until I say submit. And that way you won't be influenced by anybody else. So here's the question. I've been on the treadmill for 20 minutes and you walk in. How much time do I have left?
"30 minutes."
Okay, go ahead and submit. Okay, and so most people are saying 30. Wow, 50. I like that. So it should be 10, 50 total, right? And as a developer, this is a real problem. Because my job now, since I don't understand the requirement, is to go track down the person that wrote it. When I find that person, what I'm going to hear is, first, I don't remember. I've been working on something else for 6 months. My least favorite is go read what I wrote. I always think to myself, I did. And if I understood it, I wouldn't be here. Right? And so I'm going to end up guessing. And of course, the tester is going to make a different guess, and so I'm going to fail my tests. In an Agile universe, Agile principle number 1 is our highest priority is to deliver value. When we test, we are not testing for conformance to a spec because we most likely don't have a spec. Our goal is to deliver value. This can cause all kinds of entertainment. So here's something my bank did. I can log into my bank and there's a list of all my accounts. And next to each one of those accounts is this little information I. And if I click on that account, it very nicely pops up my accounting number and my routing number. Okay, I got it. And it's never yet been wrong. So I can picture all the tests that were done and it passed all the tests. And this feature provides absolutely no value to me whatsoever. Why not? How did they screw this up? Yeah, you wouldn't think it would be possible, would you? uh, the answer is they never asked the question, why do I want this information? Right? They're giving me the information, but they didn't ask, why do you want it? Right? That's why we have that third clause in a user story to explain why I want this. I want this because I want to get paid. And that means I'm filling out one of my clients' forms and they've asked for these numbers. Mechanically, how would I like to fill out that form? This is an easy one. Copy and paste. Absolutely. I want to copy and paste. They implemented this so it displays a JPEG. I can't copy and paste from the JPEG. Right? So what do? I don't even use the feature. I pull out my checkbook, and that way I don't have to write the numbers down. I just copy them off of my checkbook. Right? Had the developers and the testers been part of the why do we need this discussion, that never would have happened. But instead, what we have is something that's implemented, meets its specification, and delivers no value whatsoever. So Jeff Patton, in his book Story Mapping, has this diagram, and I have always dearly loved this diagram. This is why we have refining, and that's a Jeff Patton quote. We don't need a better document. We need a shared understanding of what it is we're trying to develop. And this is why it's important that the whole development team participate in refining, not just one or two people. The third thing we're going to look at is a concept called technical debt. Technical debt conceptually is a very, very simple concept. It's the difference between what you've got and what you wish you had. The way we fix technical debt is with something called refactoring. Refactoring is making changes that don't change the functionality. They improve the quality. However you're defining quality, maintainability, readability, understanding, reduction in complexity, reduction in coupling. There's 10,000 different ways that we can define quality. And that's what we're looking at here, is improving the quality. The simple fact of the matter is this happened because of time pressure. Right? We had to get done, we had to get done, we had to get done, and so we did get done. The second fact is that no one is ever going to refund or fund you to fix this, to make it better. It has to be an incremental process. So what we're going to do now is talk about what happens if you are working in an environment with a mountain of technical debt. So I'm going to have to move a couple of things here in order to do this. We'll see if it will let me move things. And in order to do this, I'm going to have to stop sharing and then restart the share. So let's bring you up. There we go. It's finally allowing me to do that. So working on a project that is loaded with technical debt is not fun. And it goes something like this.
you replace that light bulb in the kitchen?
What does it look like I'm doing?
And that's the life of a developer when you're working on an application that has a huge level of technical debt in it. It is extraordinarily difficult to estimate anything. Every time you try and change something, 5 other things break. Right? It's just a very unfun life. Spaghetti code, absolutely. Absolutely. Also referred to as big ball of mud, and a few other things that I'm not going to say since this is being recorded. The third concept we're going to talk about is continuous integration. Continuous integration basically says that as soon as I have finished a chunk of code and I think my little chunk of code is working, I need to put it together with everything that's been written so far and make sure it plays nicely with its friends. In the old days, we used to have what was called the Big Bang theory of integration, where we wrote code and we wrote code and we wrote code. And one application I worked on, we had almost 1 million lines of code before we ever tried to integrate it. Yeah, so Jared, that's a wonderful facial expression because that's precisely what happened. Right? We got build errors like you wouldn't believe out of this. And the integration phase took us months. It was planned to be weeks. We used to refer to this as the Big Bang theory of integration. You have all the components, you throw them together and they're supposed to form a universe and they don't, they just blow up. So when do you integrate? The answer to that's real simple. As soon as your software passes its tests, you want to know it plays nicely with everybody else. Nowadays, we want a tool to do this for us. And there's lots of open source tools out there. Probably the 2 most common are Jenkins and Hudson, but there's lots of them out there. Lots of them out there. And so the process works something like this. We're developers, we're cranking away, we're writing our code. I finish mine, and so I check it into whatever version control system we're using. Git is very, very popular these days. That triggers the CI server. And what the CI server is going to do is clone the entire repository, build the code, run all the tests for me. And all this happens invisibly to me. I don't see this. I don't care. It's happening in the background. I can go on and work on something else. When it's done, it sends out reports, and those reports can go to whoever signs up for them. So certainly as a developer, I want to see what happened with my code. Very often, stakeholders want to be kept informed with what's going on. If you're counting, this is 5. Right? I decided I'm having difficulty with a client on refining, so I added those slides this morning, actually. But the last one is pair programming. Pair programming initially drives managers insane because it is 2 developers, 1 keyboard. And the immediate reaction is that's only 50% efficient. It turns out that pair programming for the initial stage of development will take you longer, roughly 15% longer. But you will more than make up for it in the integration phase. You will more than make up for it in the maintenance phases because the quality of the code is substantially higher. Mob programming and swarming are similar but different. We use mob programming. Mob programming is a group. Usually it's the entire team. And we use this when we're first starting out, just to make sure everybody understands what we're trying to build and what the overall structure is going to look like. Swarming is the same group of people, but we have a problem we're trying to fix. So in my shop, we swarm on 2 occasions. One of them, on the previous slide, if somebody breaks the build. So you check in code and it breaks the build of the application. We're all going to look at it to try and get the build back up and running because having running code is a critical aspect of being agile. The second time we will do swarming occurs after our daily stand-up. So we size tasks so they can be done in a day. If there's a task on our board that's there for a second stand-up, we put a red star on it. That's something that has a problem. If it's there a third day, we swarm on it to get it fixed. Unless the problem is something like, it depends on the vendor software and the vendor didn't deliver, right? Well, I can't fix that by swarming, so we won't bother to try. The critical thing to think about here is here. This is what's happened to your developers. We have for years worked in a command and control. The boss's job is to assign tasks to us. That's kind of like the system on the left. And we're being asked to transition to the system on the right. Now, those of you that live in Carmel have done this. Those of you that drive in Carmel have done this. This is not easy, right? But it is substantially more efficient. It's more efficient because of the three questions we have at the bottom. Who's making the decisions? When are they making those decisions? And what information are they using to make those decisions? People in Greenwood are still figuring this out. Yeah, you haven't lived until you've gone to England and tried to do a 5-lane roundabout and gotten
On the other side of the road.
Yes, on the wrong side of the road, and you get stuck in the middle. It may be 2 days before you get out. That's just the way it is. Yeah, actually, that came about because of jousting. That's why they drive on the side of the road they do, is that most knights were right-handed. And so you drive on the other side of the road, so your lance is on the same side. Interesting enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you guys a chance to apply this. And the way we're going to do this is on a Miro board. So I will put links into the Miro boards in just a minute, so that you guys all have access to them. Oh, by the way, I posted in the chat, and let me put it in case you missed it. If you want the slide deck that I showed, you can, and that didn't work. You can download it from the Google Drive. So what we're going to do, we have low 30s number of people here, is that correct? 43 people here. So I'm going to make 6 teams. That'll give us roughly 7 people on a team, not counting me. And then I'm going to pair the teams up. So team 1 and 2, you'll be working together. 3 and 4, you'll be working together. And 5 and 6, you'll be working together. The link I'm going to give you is going to take you to a Miro board, and the Miro board, assuming this comes up, will look like this. And so I have in mind, I'm going to be your product owner, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk to me about this, but I want a poster. I want a poster that tells me everything there is to know about Agile. And so I've defined that as a poster that has the Agile values, the Agile principles on it, and then the Scrum values, empirical process control, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what your job is going to be is to start on this. You're going to have one 9-minute sprint. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to plan, and then a 9-minute sprint. You will by no means get everything done. You won't come close. Don't even try. But what I want is each team to pick what we're going to work on. What I want is for each grouping. So team 1 and 2, I want 1 poster. Teams 3 and 4, I want 1 poster. On that poster, if you're using words, so primarily I want pictures, and I want pictures broken off into sections. I have put the product backlog in order, but there's a lot of refining that hasn't been done yet. So for example, I want 4 pictures that describe the 4 Agile values, 1 for each value. Hopefully you don't need any words, that I can look at the picture and say, oh, that's what that represents. That was pretty clever. But you may need some words, no more than 5 words. There's 12 principles. You may decide that there's no way we can do 12 principles in a sprint. So part of your sprint planning process, you are allowed to decompose this. You may decompose it into 6 stories. Each one has 2 principles. 3 stories, each one has 4 principles. But what I want you to do is decompose it into chunks that are small enough that you believe you can finish in the 9-minute sprint that I'm going to give you. Okay, any questions? Wow, my directions were perfect. That's kind of never happened before. Okay, then let me come back here, and I'm just going to start posting things in the chat. So that isn't what I wanted to do. So here is that's the board we'll use for room 1. And let's just come here and go 2, and open you in a new tab, and 3, and open you in a new tab, and 4, open you in a new tab, 5. Enter, and then 6. Okay, so while I'm doing this, Jenny, can you set up so that we have 6 breakout rooms and give them the ability to move back and forth between breakout rooms? We only have 2 of the boards. Yes, I know. I'm working on the others. And it's giving me a hard time. So you're going to have to do a joint sprint planning session between team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. And so that's why you need the ability to move between rooms. Then you can go back to your other room.
Say one more time why we are moving between rooms.
Because team 1 and team 2 are cooperating on the same poster, right? And so what I don't want is team 1 to do the Agile values and team 2 to do the Agile values and duplicate each other. So you're working separately. Okay, there we go. So there's the room for 6. Okay. So the problem is you can't do this ahead of time because if you join, you can't see anything that was posted before you joined. So normally I preload all this stuff, but can't do that. Okay, that should be the links for all of the rooms. Jenny, did you get the breakout room set up? And I'm going to assume the answer to that was no. So we're going to do 6. We're going to create. I'm going to give you 9 minutes. And so 9 minutes. And I'm going to allow you to move between rooms. So actually, I'm going to give you 14 minutes. So you guys get to manage your time here. You have 5 minutes to sprint plan. In other words, which team is doing which user stories, and then 9 minutes to execute. Any questions before I send you away? Okay, I'll see you back in 14 minutes. Well, so Lisa and Mark, did you give up?
There was no, it's prompting me for a password. I was in a room.
Oh, yes. Sorry. And yes, it is prompting you for a password. And the password is Agile Indie.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. I forgot to mention that.
Okay. All right.
were you in a breakout room and I can put you back there? You already did.
Hello.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hello.
I guess the recording paused while we went out in the breakout room. So
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
if that's normal or not.
I don't know. I don't know of a way to switch the recording to one of the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Don't know how to do that. How far did you get?
Group 5 got through the Agile
Agile
value.
values.
Oh, you did. So let's. Wow. Did you work on board 5 or 6?
Board 5.
Okay.
There's no 1 and 6.
Yeah, we only had one person in group 6, so he came over and worked with us. We added him
Okay.
to
Well,
a
that'll make life easy. Wow. Okay. So let me pop that up for you. So you guys made incredible, amazing progress on this. That's fantastic. That's usually at the end of the first sprint, nobody has anything that they can show. The work of the two teams isn't integrated, and you learn valuable lessons about continuous integration and how much coordination is required between team members and between various teams. So wow, that's amazing that you guys got this far. That's wow. I'm really impressed.
Hey.
I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Okay, it's your guys' turn. What questions do you have for me?
Well, I guess why only 5 words? Because you can see there's a bug. We have more than 5 words on some of them. Yeah.
That's okay. We can iterate.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's a perfect case of, okay, now we need to refactor a little bit. So
right.
You have more complexity than is allowed in your first design. That's fine.
So if between the two you assigned, was there one which was higher priority or value for you? The values versus the principles?
Yeah, so if you looked at the board, let me pull the board down here. The product backlog is in priority order. Right, so the highest thing was the values and the second highest was the principles.
Okay.
So I'll offer a aha moment. Bill, when you said that we looked at estimating as a way to gain shared understanding, and the example of somebody thought it was a 3 and somebody thought it was an 8. Obviously, they're not looking at the same problem or looking at the problem the same way.
Yeah.
That was a really good insight. I think that's something you can tangibly take back to team and talk to a team about when they start saying, "Well, we can estimates. We don't know how much this is." If you table it like that, I think that's a really good insight.
Yeah, right. Because it's to me, the biggest problem with estimation is managers try and turn them into commitments. All right. And as long as you're using estimates for prediction and for understanding, they're great things. As soon as you start using them for performance measurements, you've destroyed the purpose. And I've tried to explain this to many managers, that I'm a better developer than you'll ever be. And what that means is, no matter how good a manager you are, there's no metric you can create that I can't gain. Right? You're going to use velocity to measure my performance. I'll increase it every sprint. Easy to do. And of course, by doing that, I've made it completely useless. So good. I'm glad that you got. Yeah, I think that's to me a tremendously valuable point in estimation. It really allows us to highlight where I see a difficulty that you missed, or where you see a simplification that I didn't. I actually sat in one estimating session, and around the room, it was 2020, 2022. It's like, what the heck? And it was the new guy on the team. And he said, well, in my last job, I did it. Here's how you solve that. It's like, wow. Should have hired you a month ago. How many points a team estimate as long as they discuss it? Yes, exactly. And it's that shared understanding that we're looking at. Ruth, you have nailed the whole point of it. It doesn't matter what the resolution is. It matters that we agree, that we have this shared vision. Yep. Yeah, that's another thing, is discussion on the value. Right? And by the way, those two things are related. A product owner may say, this is really important, up until you tell them, well, it's 8 months worth of work. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's not worth 8 months worth of work. That's fine, but it's, you know, these are informed decisions that need to be made between the product owner and the developers.
Bill, how would you, what would you do to suggest to get a team started with TDD?
Wow, boy, you talk about a self-serving answer to that question. You know, this is what I do for a living, is teach certified Scrum developer classes. So the first thing you need to do is get them to understand what it is and some of the reasons why we do it, and then try it. You know, in retrospectives, we talk about some experiment we're going to run. Well, our experiment for this sprint is we're going to do TDD, right? And see how we like it, but we're going to commit this sprint, we're going to do it.
Nice. And at some point, and you could do this now since I kind of opened that up, is just like what you know, if someone do you have public classes or private, or
I
how
do have
people...
public classes.
Okay.
In fact, I have one next this weekend coming up. So if you're really in a hurry to learn TDD, you can do that. There are only 45 people in the world that teach certified Scrum developer classes right now. And the easy way to find them is to, well, here, let me just do it for you. Come over here and share. And we'll share this screen. And if you want to find classes, you go to the Scrum Alliance's website, which is scrumalliance.org, and hit certification, come over here and hit developer, and then find a course. And coincidentally, because mine is the nearest one in time, it's the top one up here. I don't know Fadi, who teaches a lot. I do know Paul Moore, and I do know David Birdstein. And so this is the place to find the courses.
Fadi's a good guy, and he's a skier too, so A-okay in my book. So Fadi is a good guy, and he's a skier too, so A-okay in my book.
Okay, I have never met him. Almost all the other ones I know. So it's, I can't say great guy, I can't say avoid, I never met him, which is kind of interesting. I was on the group that developed the learning objectives for the certified Scrum developer and the advanced certified Scrum developer. And Paul Moore was part of that. Who else was? Wow, this is all the only, see what I mean? There's just not that many courses. So if you were to go to Scrum Master, I guarantee you get more than one page. So yes, thank you for that. So yes, I do private classes, I do public classes, and all the other instructors do too. And with only 45 of us, it's a small community, and I have never met anyone that I didn't consider to be good. So it's hard to go wrong. Okay, we got 5. You know, Fatty, where is the intersection between? Oh, what a great question. What a great question. TDD and BDD. So BDD is also called specification by example. So let me pull up something that I can type in here. And we're just going to type in Word for a minute since I'm sharing. So let's suppose that we have an application that we're developing, and the application is validating. Actually, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do, let's go here. Come on, open up. Yeah, I don't want you. It drives me nuts when I tell it to do something and it doesn't do it.
That's that last frontier for computers. Yeah. You start doing what you think you want them to do, not what you tell them to do.
Yes. Yeah, that's always been a wonderful, why did it do that? Because you told it to. Let's suppose that we're developing an application that processes loans. And one of the requirements for this is credit score. And the user story says that the customer must have, or the applicant must have a good credit score. Right? Well, that's great. So we start talking with the product owner and ask the question, what's a good credit score? And the product owner answers 720. So these are the conversations that we're having. BDD, or specification by example, says that we're going to use examples to illustrate that requirement. And so a good tester would immediately say, I see 3 examples here. So those would be the 3 credit scores that we test. And this one would clearly be a reject. This one would clearly be an approve. And this one, we'd go back to the product owner and say, what do you want? And so they say approve. This would be a start. A really good tester would look at this and go, these things have ranges. And so you would see something that looked like this, where this one would clearly be a reject. This one is probably some kind of error message is going to be thrown out, because that shouldn't happen. And you should have the same type of thing here at the top end, where this would be an approve, and this would be some type of error message. A fantastic tester would ask the question, where are these coming from? And we'd say they're coming from TRW or Equifax or whoever it happens to be. And when you have that, then we would add even more tests to this. What happens if I get a timeout, if I don't get an answer? What happens if when I parse their credit score, what I parse it to is dog? Right? I use that example because the first application I ever wrote, the tester crashed by typing dog into the date field. And I made the mistake of asking the tester what type of idiot types dog in a date field. And the tester responded, I don't know. What type of idiot doesn't protect himself against idiots typing dog in the date field? It's like, oh, I get it. This is specification by example. And then these will be turned into the test cases that we will write the code to pass. So TDD to me requires BDD. We have to come up with the examples. And then we can turn those examples into tests and write code to pass those tests.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Got just a couple minutes left, guys. Any final questions for Bill?
Okay, thank you all very much. Right. I appreciate you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, Bill. That's just
sure.
Me talking. Appreciate your time, and guys, we'll have this recording on YouTube. We'll get the slides posted up as well, so you guys can access those. For those of the guys attended tonight, I'll follow up with an email to enter a chance to win those 3 books that Bill recommended at the beginning of our session tonight. So thanks everyone. Again, we're off on August, so enjoy your little summer break there, and hope we can see everyone in September. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Bye.